On this episode of the Star Trek Universe podcast, we are talking about Star Trek Discovery, episode 308, The Sanctuary, and we're getting into your feedback as well. Right after these messages from people we have absolutely no control over.
Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast, the podcast where you get to listen in on the continuing Star Trek conversation that two lifelong friends have been having since they were 5 years old. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
What is happening, Dave?
Oh, you know, man, from the streets, 205.
Yep, that's true.
I don't know.
205 life.
That's what I've heard. That's what they tell me, the kids these days.
So, what are your, I don't know, should we just go straight into the freaking summary here?
I mean, sure, if that's what you want to do.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Let's talk about Discovery.
All right, man. The CBS All Access summary. Burnham and the USS Discovery crew travel to Book's home planet to help rescue it from Osyraa, the formidable leader of the Emerald Chain. Meanwhile, Stamets and Adira continue their search for valuable information on the origin of the burn.
Who's Adira? I'm just joking. Still getting used to the new crew and people, and even the ones that have been here for 3 years.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. I'm like, who? Wait, what? But no, I remember Reese now, and when I see her name on the screen, I go, oh yeah, I know who that goes to. And Detmer, I know Detmer.
Yep, I know Detmer. I got Detmer down now.
So, and then and I don't know her name, but when I see the blonde girl, I go, "Oh, hey, that's the robot lady."
Yeah, and now I've forgotten the robot lady's name. We're such bad podcasters.
I mean, what do you want to do? I'm really bad about names.
No, I think here's the thing with this show, and it's interesting because I think it's changed this season, which is why we're both starting to do a little more recognizing of more people. I think this show for the first few seasons was like it was the Burnham show, and all of the rest of the crew was sort of just ancillary, and depending on your proximity to Burnham was how much screen time you got.
I mean, there is that, and that is a common complaint with people.
I'm not even complaining. I'm just saying, like, I think that is I'm not. That's not a value judgment. It's a like that's just why I didn't know the other people's names as well.
If we're being fair, Discovery, with its shorter episode count, is doing what every other Star Trek show would have done and did do for the most part. Like, TNG was basically the Picard and Data show.
Right.
And then every once in a while, Worf would get a couple episodes.
There's one major difference, and that is that Discovery is not about the captain.
Right.
So every other Star Trek show has sort of centered around the captain, and then maybe one other standout character that was a fan favorite, like Spock or Data, or Seven of Nine.
The Doctor.
Yes. Yeah. So it's basically characters with like trying to become more human or less human or whatever.
The character that shows us our humanity, as opposed to all of the human characters who don't seem to have any personality whatsoever.
Well, I think that part of the reason they're all fan favorites is because they're outsiders, and I think a lot of Star Trek fans consider themselves a little bit outsider, and there's a little bit of like, oh, I see what Data's doing, because I mean, and there's a that sort of geek personality type where like you kind of don't get humanity fully, and like you feel a little different than everyone else. And I think everyone does to some degree, but there's a certain strain of that in the sort of geeky community and sci-fi fan community that like, we watch those characters and we go, yeah, I get he doesn't exactly fit in, but he's valued for other reasons, and I connect and respond to that,
Right. I mean, I know I related to it when, I saw Data playing poker with Stephen Hawking. I thought I did that just last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't? But yeah, no, I think so. That's my point. My point is, previously the shows have been about the captain, which made them tend to be about whatever the mission was. Yeah. And then whoever was important to the mission would kind of get featured from week to week. This show is not generally about the captain. It's about whatever Burnham's doing up until this season. And this season has felt a lot more about the ship and the show. And it's felt a lot more ensemble, I guess. More traditional.
It has felt more ensemble. I will give it that. Yeah. Though, to be fair, in the previous seasons, the ensemble was a little different. Like, and we're still dealing with some of that. Like, you had freaking Jason Isaacs' character, who I, for some reason, can't remember his name anymore.
Captain Lorca.
Lorca was there, and he was like such a huge chunk of the show. And then last season, Pike was there. Pike and Spock and Number One were there, and they were huge parts of the show, just like sucking up any time that poor Detmer or Owo or anybody could have, possibly had.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, that like some of these guest appearances that have lasted an entire season have kind of like Spock and Pike and Lorca, and yeah, that's a good point.
There's Georgiou. She's consistently there. She's been a guest star for 2 damn years. So they've been trying to spin her off for 2 years, man.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So, I think, and not to mention Ash Tyler.
Yeah. No, I agree. There have been other characters, but that all of that to say and I guess these other characters were always sort of some form of what was going on instead of the status quo, if that makes sense. Like all 4 of those characters you mentioned are all characters that like they're part of what's going on. Pike is not on Discovery. He's just like a guest captain because they need the ship. And then Ash Tyler is part of the plot as much as he is a character, You've got all this going on, and definitely the same thing with basically all those characters you mentioned. And so like, I guess like Lorca, we never really got things from Lorca's perspective. We were always seeing Lorca through the eyes of Burnham, and so like I said, it all just is how close are you to Burnham? Are you part of her mission? Are you part of the mystery she's trying to solve? Then you're like you're central to the show. And this year they have less of that going on, and now it's actually like kind of a core crew is emerging.
Well, I don't think they have less of whatever mystery Burnham is trying to solve.
No, I'm saying there's not a character that is that mystery. Lorca was that mystery. Ash Tyler was that mystery. And season 2 was not that. Season 2 was more like, it was her navigating the relationship between like, this new captain and what he would do with the ship,
Yeah. There is, whether it's taken, as a criticism or not, I do somewhat take issue with the argument that everything is about Burnham, because while that is kind of there, and it is there, but look at how much we've gotten of Stamets and Culber and Tilly, and it is somewhat about like who's in Burnham's orbit because she is the lead, but at the same time is also like, it's unfair, I feel, to say that it's the Michael Burnham show, because it's not. They have done a really good job of like roping in lots of different people.
No, I wasn't saying, again, not a criticism. Not a criticism. I'm saying it's a shift in the direction of the show to now I feel like this show is about what is happening to Discovery, and Burnham is a part of that tapestry. And as previously, it was like about what was happening to Burnham, and all these characters were kind of whoever was orbiting her was sort of more related to the story than anything else. Not a criticism. I just think it's pretty clearly like, yes, all of those characters have had more time to be fleshed out, but it's like the guy she betrayed who had to learn to trust her again, the best friend, her direct report. Like, these are the people that we've gotten to know the last few seasons because they were all her direct people that were directly in contact with her.
Do you feel like they've wasted a lot of time on the show?
No, Like I said, none of this is Chris.
I know. I'm just asking you, man. Asking you a thing.
No, I don't think they wasted time. I think they made some bad choices. I wouldn't say they wasted time though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel like thinking back on all of the people they were fleshing out that we just don't have anymore.
Well, but those people allowed us to, and I think Ash Tyler's still around. I think we'll see him again, if not this show, possibly on a Section 31 show, or possibly on a Pike show on Strange New Worlds. Like Ash Tyler is still kicking around in the universe, and so are Pike and Number One. Like they've made characters that are gonna be around.
It'd be hilarious if Discovery's biggest legacy was just spinning off lots of other shows.
It would not be the first. Would not be the first to show to be that way. I don't think any of that time was wasted because it was they all related to those seasons, and I think Lorca's character was incredibly important to the story of season 1. You know, we needed him. He was a villain. He was a great villain that they took an entire season to build, and that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. I don't know. There are a few things that I would have changed, but overall, I really have enjoyed Discovery. And I've really enjoyed, I like when they do season long arcs and then like huge things are changed by, if you look back if you're 3 seasons in and you look back and you're like, oh my God, I forgot about all those people that died or moved on and did this and this. And
or just look at the show and see what it is now versus what it was then,
Right. Yeah. I am not a huge on status quo on dramas.
Yeah, me neither.
So,
I think we've talked about that pretty ad nauseum. That's the major reasons why we like the Star Treks that we like so much. We were watching that documentary recently about DS9. Drove this point home, but that documentary talks a lot of what we left behind. Talks a lot about how it was sort of a trailblazer in the overarching plot department. Not even just for Star Trek, but for TV in general. And me and you, that was our formative years for television, So that was some of the stuff that we really, as adults, we were really biting our teeth into as young adults, And so, for me, this is the kind of Star Trek I've always loved. And when I look back and just the reason DS9 is my favorite and the reason Voyager's one of my least is because of the way they allow for change. Right.
And even the original series, when I was growing up and I found out about the movies, all of a sudden they were paying off all the stuff from the original series and they're old men now. And I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at how much they're paying off.
The insanity of, and I'm not saying it's going to sound insulting to the original series, but I don't mean it that way. But the insanity of this fun little star wagon train to the stars show that was hit or miss. What's that Futurama joke? It's
79 episodes, about 30 good ones.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's fairly accurate. It's not wrong. It's a super imaginative show, but there's some shit in there and there's some great stuff in there.
Futurama is never wrong about that stuff.
Yeah.
Those writers are fans.
Yeah. So I think that is true. And, but you can't say that show is not a status quo show, It is the most status quo of all the Star Treks. But to take that little wagon train to the stars weekly episode show and then turn it into a set of movies that are so, serialized and have these overarching plots that go not even just from movie to movie and characters, but the second one ends, or the third one ends. They're on a Klingon bird of prey, and they stay on that Klingon bird of prey for the next movie.
Yeah,
it's great. I love that kind of stuff. I absolutely love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I love the notion of looking at you had 3 seasons of young men, as McCoy would put it in Star Trek II, galloping around the galaxy. And then what happens to those people when the mission is over? That's so depressing. And you see it in Kirk. He's 50 years old. He's depressed. He doesn't know he barely knows his son. His son, doesn't know him. He doesn't have a family. And that continues on through generations. I love how even Star Trek V looks at like the purpose of life after their travels and like where they are. Like in Star Trek VI, they're what do we do with these prejudices we've earned throughout our travels?
Yeah.
What now? What a slippery slope that turned out to be. We went right back to the old ways. Like, oh my God, it's just so good. So like we were pushed into this from a young age. I swear.
Yeah, man, I'm fully with you, and I think it's so cool that they pivoted that way, and that pivot I think allows for what we have now. Clearly it does. If they hadn't been able to do that, like, would we have been able to see the serialized nature of something like DS9 that then led into, Enterprise and this? Anyway, that's a weirdly large scope discussion for what we're here today to do, which is break down The Sanctuary, Season 3, Episode 8. Mm-hmm. By the way, speaking of large scope discussions, when does this season end? We got 13 episodes?
Yes.
So it should be ending right around the end of the year or the beginning of in January. Mm-hmm. And there's no Trek after that, right?
I mean, not that I know of.
Well, yeah, nothing's been announced yet, and with COVID delays, it looks like we're gonna get a little bit of a break.
You hate to say it like that, but yeah.
No. I mean, break from content. But I was thinking.
I know what you mean. But.
I was thinking we might try to tackle some of the movies in the break there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I know we've talked about it. We just haven't had the time, and
we just need to make time and act like it's another episode of Discovery coming out.
That's what I'm thinking. So let's try to make that happen. We will. You guys
start whacking away.
If you guys want to hear that, let us know. I'd love to tackle all the movies. Either and even I think it'd be really cool to start at the beginning and tackle a few key episodes of original series, maybe.
Sure.
Just a few key ones, like pick top 5 kind of thing, and just sort of talk about the themes and things that happen in those 5, and then tackle the movies, and then kind of move through the series that way. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm down with that.
I'd love to do the whole thing, but it's just going to take. We discussed it. If we did it once every week, it would take like 30 years. So,
we should figure out what that 30 is that Futurama was talking about.
Well, let's try for like a top 5, because I do want to get into the movies, and if we pick too many, we're never going to make it to the movies.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you guys have any recommendations, how about that? You guys hit us up with your favorite episodes, and we'll try to put together a list and pick those top 5.
Yeah, you guys have a special request.
Tell us your top 5. That's actually really fun. You guys send in your top 5 original series episodes. I'm sure you have a top 5, Dave. I don't think I do.
You would have had to have seen 5 episodes.
I have seen 5 episodes. I've seen all the episodes, but I was a child and I didn't watch them 15 times like you did, but like I've only watched the whole series once, and then kind of here and there after that. So
yeah,
and it was like marathoning it, and it all kind of blurs together. So
right. See, it will be tough. It will be hard for me to sit down, and because I have like my top 5, like these are the best. And then I also have like my top 5. These are, my favorites because they're so bad. And
that'll be a different conversation. Let's go for bests. Let's try to get the best of them and tackle that. And maybe we'll do like a top 5 worst or like funniest to tackle episodes.
Yeah. But it's, God, there are some that you hate to bash because yes, they're silly, but the message is so good. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the first one that comes to mind is like the Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, where
half white, half black people,
half white guys. Yeah.
They're
so
white on the left side of the face. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. Anyway,
let's get to it.
We should talk about Sanctuary, which, by the way, the last episode of Discovery is January 7th.
Okay.
So
cool. I have a lot of stuff I'm trying to wrap up the end of the year. But yeah, like let's keep this Trek cast moving weekly, because I've missed it when we didn't do it. So
yeah, and when there's a break, we tend to break on the show, and
yeah, and sometimes we need a break. Sometimes we have other creative things we've got to do, but I really would like to keep this moving if we can.
Yep. So I'm down with that, man. That sounds fun.
Yeah, let's try our best. Okay, guys, we have the Sanctuary. We get to see Book's planet. What did you think? Book's planet. We've heard a little bit about Book's planet and his people.
Yeah, we saw some trees. We didn't see a lot.
Yeah, we got a little bit of his culture. We find out his brother is. We found out a little bit about their relationship. We found out his brother is kind of taking this heel turn and thrown in with Osira.
Which he just felt like Calvin Hudson light or something.
I don't know who that is.
Remember the bit from the Maquis episode of Deep Space? It's a 2-parter, Deep Space Nine, where like Sisko's old buddy. Like
vaguely.
he goes to find his buddy Cal Hudson. Cal's leading the Maquis now.
Very vaguely.
Yeah, it's like that's the big like they get down to the planet and then Cal comes out with the phasers and he's like, "No, not you."
Yeah, I do remember that.
That's what it felt like.
Again, it's been a long time.
It's okay. I'm trying to ease you into this, man.
Don't to ease me in. I'm fully in. It's just been a long time.
Like an old man into a warm bath.
All right. Let's see. I really liked the conversation we got with I was watching this with Alyssa, as I often do, and she was commenting
Who's
how
that?
much my girlfriend Alyssa. She was commenting how much she loved Georgiou. She just hasn't really seen much of Georgiou, I guess. And she really was enjoying like all the just like she was like, I love her. Just like all
That's
the
fun.
I'm gonna kill you stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, she's the show's Spike.
By the way, did you notice that this episode was directed by Frakes?
I did actually, yeah.
Yeah. I just like to point that out when it happens.
Yeah, he's doing it a lot. It seems like he's doing a lot of episodes, and I love it.
Yeah, man.
Always good.
Yeah.
Always really good. And I love that she called him out. Like, I've been picking on Culber over the last few episodes for being a little too...
The sage? Yeah.
He's the sage.
He's Guinan.
But he's just sort of insta-Guinan all of a sudden. And I love that she was like, you see yourself as a hero, don't you? Oracle of the mess hall.
That is a well-hung lantern.
Yeah, I loved it.
Oracle of the mess hall. I just wish he had come back with, I died, I have thoughts.
So they also they did a call out to a transwarp. I think they call it a transwarp tunnel. In this, they said they said they're trying to get to where they need to go, and they say we can't get there by this. We don't risk discovery, but we only have a 50% chance of surviving a transwarp tunnel, which I thought was interesting because they're just, I guess, calling out the fact that like, I guess transwarp doesn't use dilithium, right?
I have no idea.
I don't know. It just sounds like they still haven't cracked transwarp technology.
I mean, I don't know what they were using. Like, there was the slipstream technology from Voyager. That was a Borg thing, but I would assume dilithium was involved.
Well, and transwarp was also a Borg thing. But they just said here, we have a 50% chance of just surviving a transwarp tunnel, as if like, that's always an option we have, this thing that we don't want to do. I just thought it was an interesting sort of tech, like call out to, for some reason, they still haven't cracked transwarp, even though it seems like the Borg did it a long time ago.
Yeah, but you know, Star Trek 3, they had a transwarp ship. It was the Excelsior, and Scotty freaking sabotaged it.
I think it's a different transwarp, though.
They have said it was a different transwarp. Yeah. But to be clear, that is for story purposes. Like, they just called it the same thing later and said, oh, this is different than the 23rd century transwarp. So, I mean, all I'm saying is we could just put that right into the same category. This is a different transwarp than the one they couldn't crack in the 24th century.
Sure. I just took it as this is them saying, like, they're telling the fans who are like, well, if warp doesn't work, why haven't you tried transwarp tunnels like they were doing in, they rode in some transwarp conduits.
Right.
In
and I've definitely
Voyager.
seen people bring that up.
Right. And so it was interesting that they called it out, that's why they don't do it. I don't know. I like to call out. Oh, big headline this episode. You were completely right about the melody.
Yeah.
At least that it connects, not necessarily how it'll all shake out, but
Yeah, and we've got some feedback about that, and we could just go ahead and talk about that if you don't mind.
sure, yes, jump to the melody.
Lil Trank said, question, what ship is at the heart of that nebula?
Well, there's a melody going on.
And there's a ship that's in the middle of the nebula that's sending out an SOS.
Do we think it's Discovery?
Okay. It is probably a duplicate Discovery from that will wind up being in Calypso.
Mm-hmm.
That has not been upgraded. That way, Calypso can happen and Discovery can continue for however many years CBS All Access wants to continue for.
Right.
My personal hope is, and you're going to hate me for saying this.
Oh, no.
My personal hope is it is a Starfleet vessel from pre-Discovery TOS era who saw their entire timeline get wiped out by the temporal war and got caught in some kind of bullshit temporal wake. And as they're slowly, meticulously getting ripped apart, they're playing that melody to calm the crew like the Titanic. Having the band play as they sank. And is echoing across the galaxy. Interesting.
My mind, I like the idea that it could be some remnant of the temporal war. It could be some last. I would say it's more likely that
but it's totally Discovery.
I hope not. I hope it's not Discovery, but that's like where my mind immediately goes because this show likes to eat its own tail. But every show these days likes to eat its own tail. Since Fight Club, nothing is not yourself. Yourself is always the bad guy.
Right. Like the late 90s and early 2000s introduced what is commonly referred to as the mindfuck genre, where it's just like Donnie Darko, Fight Club, Usual Suspects. Like every dramatic movie has to have like some crazy. Let's not forget the works of M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh yeah.
Suddenly everyone in Hollywood rewatched a couple of old Twilight Zone episodes and went, oh wait.
Yeah. So I like your idea though. Like we're post temporal wars. Some sort of temporal war remnant is in there, and maybe around because I don't know when these temporal accords were. Do we know exactly?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure they told us, but I don't have it pulled up.
I'm just thinking,
and I don't know where I would look.
I'm wondering how long after the temporal Cold War, or the temporal wars, did the burn happen, and was it in some way related? Like
there was the temporal Cold War,
right?
That was in what was it, the 30th century?
Okay, so that's 2900 something.
And then, like, the burn happened, what was it, 100 years ago or so? It was less than 200 years ago.
Right. I think they said like 120 or so.
But I'm worried. Oh, well, not worried. I'm wondering if the temporal Cold War is the same as the temporal wars.
Right. They called it temporal wars. I'm assuming the temporal Cold War heated up and it went to actual war at some point. So anyway, my point being, I think it lines up that this could be a remnant from the temporal wars somehow, and they're doing something that's causing some damage to our timeline. And if that's the case, then the burn could have been some sort of actual attack from another universe.
Right. I'm hoping the burn, it was not meant to be an attack of any kind. I'm hoping it was like, maybe it is part of that SOS, and it's just like they were trying to tell them something. They didn't mean to do the dilithium thing, but the temporal nebula did some kind of weird bullshit. And, you know, they totally do Devil in the Dark, where, you know, they're like, she's not trying to kill the miners. She's trying to protect her children.
Right. It's possible. I don't know. I'm really interested because I think that this season's been so good so far. Yeah. And I'm just enjoying all of the world building. And it's like, you know, you talk about the Shyamalans and the 90s, 2000s stuff. I think that the show that has changed everything again for us is, you know, we had all that. I think the Breaking Bad model is the better model now.
Yeah.
Because it's just based on the characters are in the story, the characters are in this situation. What would this character, if they were a real human being, what would they do? And how do those stories interact? And that's kind of the kind of storytelling I'm super interested in now. So I'm less interested in like the big mystery being revealed to be, you know, it was you all the time or whatever. Well, I love that kind of stuff. I especially loved it when I was a teenager and it was kind of like new to me. Or at least it wasn't old to me, I guess is what I mean. But yeah, I'd love to see that this is just an outcropping of something that we could know, you know. It's an action.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember us, you know, you and me when we were watching DS9 and Voyager and stuff, like, oh, what does this mean? And then it wouldn't turn out to be really anything. And you're like, oh, all right. Like that wasn't anywhere near as cool as any of our theories. But then like people like us went on to create stuff like Lost, and I don't know. I think that brought back a lot of Serling type of storytelling in some ways. For sure. Still wouldn't always pay off in the ways that you wanted it to, and sometimes you feel like your theories are better than theirs. But that's why I like podcasting about this stuff. I love to have these conversations and just like dig down on what the theories could be. But at the same time, I don't really. I'm not looking for a big twist. I just want something interesting. You know, I want interesting things to be. I want interesting decisions to be being made by interesting characters. You know. Yep.
Which brings us to like Osyraa.
Yeah.
I'd like her to be a little less mustache twirly, maybe, but also it makes sense. She's just a despot in this area of space where she now has about as much power as the Federation. It seems like she's not scared of the Federation at all. No,
I mean, when she killed her nephew, I was just like, oh, and you took him in. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's no redemption for you.
Yeah, she's pretty dang mustache twirly.
Yeah, like just. I mean, I'm glad they went that way with her because, you know, they could have had like a big, you know, fat guy, like just like eating a chicken leg or something.
Yeah. She's
and
definitely
just like, okay, well, he's not like a guy from the South,
right?
You know, he's not like Colonel Sanders or something.
I actually did like
owning slaves.
It crossed my mind at one point that it hadn't crossed my mind that she was a lady.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of. You know, I guess it took me a while to be like, that's a lady villain. Does that make sense? Like, she's just a villain, and I like that. Like, they didn't make her her gender part of the conversation in some ways. You know, I don't know. She just is a despot, and like it's an interesting character. She did have a little bit of characterization there, which I liked. She says, my ancestors knew. It talks about Saru being like, you would think of everything as enslavement, and she's like, my ancestors knew that power is virtue, and there is no nobility in suffering. And I just thought that line was cool. Power is virtue. Like she has been on her ancestors were enslaved, and she has been on the other side of that, and she's refusing to be that again. So there's a little more to her than just the mustache twirl, I guess.
Right. Right. So far there is like they opened the blinds a little bit and let us get a peek at like an actual character there.
Yeah. At least there's a motivation there that we can like kind of understand, like this is the culture she is from. And this is who she's become because of that. And power is a virtue. Power is virtue. That's crazy.
I would like something of a map or a timeline of the Orion culture, because, you know, obviously in original series time, we were like, oh, Orion slave girls, they were slaves. But then in Enterprise, it was revealed that the slave girls actually have some sort of like mind manipulation, and they're not really the slaves. They just pretend to be the slaves while controlling their quote unquote masters.
Yes.
So I'm curious if that was like lost, if that notion was lost even to the Orions over the years.
Well, no, that's the thing. She never says that they're enslaved. Right. She never says they're enslaved. That's what Saru says. And she responds with, my ancestors knew that power was a virtue. So like, I don't think that conflicts with that, what we know from Enterprise at all.
Right.
It's kind of fascinating because it's the two of them looking back on history and having a different set of facts. From what I understand, your people were enslaved because we're talking about a guy who is from like almost directly that time. And he probably knows them as Orion slave girls. And, you know, he doesn't know that fact. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That conversation, them having it from two different angles, it's neat.
Yeah, I can get behind it.
Me too. I loved Saru talking about his catchphrase.
Wasn't that amazing? Because that is totally like a thing that like, that's the thing, like I have created fan fiction for Star Trek, or started writing it anyway, and like had my own characters and just thought like, what does my captain say when he wants people to do things? I've totally had that thought and that conversation with myself. I've had that conversation with other fans. Like, okay, what would he say? Okay, well, if we did that, like, yeah, that's a fun thing. That's so fun.
Yeah, it really was.
To actually just, you know, kind of like nudge the fourth wall just a bit and have Saru worried about it.
Nudging the fourth wall is part of it, but also we finally have a captain that is sort of like geeky enough. That we're seeing his inner life a little bit. I feel like every captain we've ever had has kind of been a little bit of a stoic figure.
Yeah, but how did they get there? Like, seeing that, you just wonder, like, God, what pains did Picard go through to figure out what he was going to say? Like, you don't just say, you know, engage for no reason or make it so for no reason.
I absolutely agree, but I think that, like, that's what's so neat is we have this sort of still cooking captain. He's still cookie dough, man.
I know. He's still baking. I know the Buffy reference. So you can't eat her yet. I mean, whoops.
All right. I really enjoyed all the Ren stuff. I kind of hope Ren sticks around now.
Me too, man. I like that guy.
I've really enjoyed the first two seasons of the show, especially on the rewatch we did. But man, I'm excited about all the other characters. Like, I really am. I know we discussed it ad nauseum up top, but like I really am enjoying getting because now that we're going deeper on a broader base of characters, we're seeing all these other sort of like flavor characters. It felt like a lot of these other characters were flavor characters around Burnham, and now like the other characters are getting deeper, and now we're getting to know these even broader scope of characters like Ren, Book's brother. Like, I just really love it. Really, really love it. I loved Detmer telling him, you stood up to her, and you're the only one that's ever stood up to her. Yeah. Do I have that right? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, then I have the right co-pilot. I just need you to be brave a little longer.
Yeah. And I enjoyed the hell out of all of her piloting and getting her groove back.
Yeah, me too. I love it. He's telling her friends, and then I went full manual, and they're all like, "No!" And then she says, "Right, Ren?" And then he gives her like this really like sort of like gleeful thumbs up, like, "Yeah, sure," like sort of sarcastic almost.
Yep,
that was awesome.
That was fantastic.
Oh, and the cat, Ren with the cat.
Yes. I was pleased with all of that. I love that the cat like jumped out. She was like, "What the hell?"
She's like, "What is that thing?" My girlfriend also has never owned a cat in her life, and is a little fearful of them and doesn't understand them. You know, like so when they make a noise, she can't tell if it's friendly or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've lived with a cat for 3 years and I still can't tell.
Well, I think he said a line in there, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something to the effect of like, "Wait, what is that noise it's making?" or something like that. And it's like, that's exactly a line that she said before. And it just cracked me up.
That's fun.
It was great.
Yeah. What else you got, man?
Oh, I can keep going. I was just trying to like not totally control everything here. Trying not to be a control freak.
No, you're welcome to. That's what I like about this show is like I got to be the control freak over on DC on Screen.
Well, I just follow my notes here. I really enjoyed the relationship between Book and his brother, and it was like really touching when they decided to get down and be empaths together and solve the problem for their planet. And it made me so happy to see them working together and to see Book talks in this episode about wanting to, he says, this is where they're making a difference. He said, this is my, that'll always be my home, but this is where they're making a difference for planets like this. And I like being around that. And then he tells Burnham later, I want in. He wants to be in the Federation, which we've talked about before, and we were kind of torn on it. You were like, I don't really want Federation Book. I like weird, smuggler Book, but like...
Yeah, no, he sold me on his reasoning, though.
Me too, man. Which, like, that made me love him more and made me love the Federation more because, like, it's just great. It's just great, man.
This is like if I felt like I had gone... almost like I had gone 6 or 7 seasons, and suddenly, Mal Reynolds wanted into the Alliance because they were finally on the right track.
Right. Like finally sees a good look from them, it all makes me curious about what's happening with the Federation and what's going to happen with all these relationships, because this relationship to the Federation and who the Federation is and. Discovery's version of the Federation and how it relates to this century's version of the Federation, like Book has seen what they are doing, but then what if this version of the Federation decides to do something much different or darker, or like I hate saying this, but I'm scared that Book's planet is doomed. Yeah, they chose to fight against Osyraa. Osyraa doesn't stand for that. And she's on her last leg. Ren tells Detmer this episode that the chain, Tilly? Did he tell Tilly? I think that the chain is running out of dilithium.
Yeah, the Emerald Chain.
And they're gonna want Discovery. Of course, we talked about the last episode how as soon as they discover this other form of travel, someone's gonna want it. And Osyraa is a clear candidate now, and they're just like making enemies like with Osyraa left and right, like the way they, I'm worried for the entire Federation because Osyraa seems so strong,
Yeah. Do you think we'll get like some like balls out? We had no idea this was even still a thing. Deus Ex Machina from the futuristic Fenris Rangers.
Interesting.
I've been waiting on that all season. It's just like
futuristic Fenris Rangers.
Yeah, like 32nd century Fenris Rangers.
Why not? We've already got Quat Malat.
That's kind of why I don't trust them not to do it.
Right. I don't think we'll get that because I think Fenris Rangers is probably like a pretty specific thing to a specific time, but
Maybe.
Who knows? They definitely could have like future centuries counterparts. I kind of feel like that's what Book is to some degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Book was already the guy going around trying to do good in a world where the Federation didn't exist. And so that's kind of already the character we met. Like I would not have put it past them for him to be wearing like a Fenris Ranger patch on one of his like satchels or something, like where it's like people that he respected in the past from the past or something.
Right.
Like, which I'd be down for. I think that's cool.
The 32nd century Fenris Rangers controlled by the Borg Queen.
7 of 9, of course.
Absolutely. And you're just like, what happened, Seven? Oh,
I kind of love the idea of like Seven realizing she can control the Borg. We get a Seven show, right? Like, or a show that features her heavily, more of her on Picard, whatever. And like 2 or 3 seasons in, we know she can control the Borg now. We know she can sort of become their queen if she wants to be, right?
Yeah, man.
So she realizes. It's kind of like an absolute power color ups situation where like she keeps realizing that like the things she needs to do, like she can't do alone. She can't do without the power of the Borg, and like whatever thing she thinks is worth it, she ends up going back in and becoming the Borg queen, and like or taking over some portion of the Borg to go maybe fight the Borg. Like what if she takes over like a quadrant's worth of Borg to go wage a war against the Borg because they're causing incursions into their Federation space again or whatever.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be like, in my head it wouldn't be like there would be nothing organic left of her. Like in my head, she would be like she would be made of it would basically just be her consciousness and the programmable matter, like a programmable matter 7 of 9.
Yeah, but we also got in a previous incarnation of the Borg Queen, we got that version where like, even though she blew up in First Contact, we see that version of the Borg Queen again. So you could see a situation where they like rebuild her in a similar way with, may at least make her look similar out in space somewhere.
Right. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's fine. No, we didn't see her blow up. We watched her skin get eaten by freaking
that's right.
gas.
That's right. That
like dissolves flesh,
and then he like
organic material
broke her neck of her like robot self.
Right.
Man, God, I really like Osira. I know.
I really like John McClane Picard.
Well, me too. But I really like Osira. Her like trying to threaten the brother and says, "All right then, Famine. You have children, right? Have you ever seen a child starve?" Just like so evil. But then at the same time, like I kind of get her point when she's talking to Saru and he's telling her, I forget what he says. Dang. He says something about the Federation and like, we don't do this sort of, I don't know, whatever. And she says, out here, we don't bend to that kind of hubris or whatever. Like,
yes.
Like just pretending the Federation's saying they're in charge, and she's like, "No, you're not in charge of me. I don't bend to you." Like there's a little bit of me that's like, "Yeah, I'm on her side."
Yeah, just like in Serenity.
Yeah, she is the Malcolm Reynolds in that situation.
I don't murder children. I do. Yeah, she's the true believer, man.
Yeah. Well, no, I disagree. She's the freedom and power person. She's more of Malcolm Reynolds than an operative. Sorry to go all straight up. Serenity, everybody who doesn't know.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that.
She's on the opposite side of that. Like she's corrupted, she's evil, but like when she says, I don't bend to that kind of hubris, that's absolutely a Malcolm Reynolds line, but so she's more in the position of being the outsider who has her own thing going on, but now she has this power and she's gotten it through violence. And it's like, she's like a dark version of whatever that sort of like, fighting against the system turns out to be.
Right. I don't know. She feels like the operative if he was against the Alliance for real.
Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Some stuff with Adira. we get some. I wrote in my notes space jamming
Space jamming
because they're jamming. We got to see two characters actually jam a little bit. That's kind of nice.
We did.
They weren't playing.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Pre-planned thing. He's just like, I'm in G, play this, G minor or whatever.
Right.
That was kind of fun. Little piano cello party. Also, we find out that Adira's, and I think I may have mispronounced her even in this conversation. I just did it. But they, they, I'm still not used to that. I did think it was a little confusing. Okay, so I'm all on board. Them, they.
Sure.
Great. Whatever you want to be called. I don't care. I would like a little grace because I'm trying, but I'm sometimes I'm going to mess up, as I've done probably already in this conversation 3 or 4 times. But Adira is going by they. The sort of like people who are pushing against the them they pronoun switch. One of their problems with that, or at least the thing they say is their problem with that, is because them they is confusing because it's something we use for plural. So you're messing that up. But the language, what I find weird about this particular use of they is she is plural.
Yes, I did. I did notice that was poetic.
Well, it's poetic, but also
I enjoyed
when she said it. I didn't know they were going for a gender thing at all. When she said it, I was like, when she said, "Excuse me, it's they, it's them," and I was like, "What? I've never heard a trill say that they're a them. They've always been, her. Jadzia was her still." And I was like, "Oh, they're going with a gender thing. I get it.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting decision to make the one character that's going to call themselves them also the only character that is multiple characters. Yeah. Anyway.
Now I have seen some not necessarily blowback, but some questions as to whether, in Gene Roddenberry's universe would that be, because she said she hadn't told anyone but Gray, or they said that they hadn't told anyone but Gray. Why would that even be an issue? Why would they have only told Gray in Gene Roddenberry's future so far in Gene Roddenberry's future? I get it. I think, though, sometimes stuff like that is deeply personal. And, I am a straight male, and I didn't really want to talk about, I didn't even want to reference my sexuality when I was young, because
and now he won't shut up about it.
Yep. But no, like when I was a teenager,
yeah,
it's absolutely the norm in the South, especially for, a guy to be a straight man, and like girls.
And you still don't want to talk about it with other people.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because once you open yourself up to that, then all of a sudden everybody's got like, oh, you like her. Oh, you got this going on. Oh, you're doing this. Your parents don't leave you alone. They hound you, so much so that, my dad thought I was gay for a long time.
Right.
And he was not pleased with that. And I, dealt with that for a long time. So, there are reasons you don't tell people like what you prefer and who you are necessarily.
Yeah. People are private about a lot of things.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be gender or sexuality at all. Some people just don't like other people knowing their business. But it sounds like I don't know that's even, yeah. It's weird. It's weird that she didn't, hasn't brought it up. I get there's a certain level of comfort that you want to be with someone, and sometimes you'll let things slide. So I've talked to people about these sorts of issues a little bit, and sometimes they they'll let certain things slide and they're out in public. They're getting coffee and someone misgenders them. They're not going to worry about it. But then like in a, it's someone that they know and that they would like to know them. I mean, I also know people who like, you know, they have Facebook filters that let people know that they are a certain way, that, you know, either their whatever their sexuality is or whatever their
gender identity
that they like. Certain people they don't let into those things. And this is a person she's getting close. Did it again. This is a person that they are getting closer to.
To be fair, they have spent the entire season calling her she. And now in just this episode, they have changed it to they.
That's true. But I'm trying to gender her the way she would like to be gendered. I can't even do it. Can't even do it once right. And it's also always this uncomfortable thing. And I've been reading a lot on racial issues this year, as many people have. And one of the things that like I have learned is an issue for us whites. Is that we are, especially in the South, part of the problem is we are trained that from an early age, the civil rights was solved in the 60s. Mm-hmm. So we are trained that it is sort of polite to not even mention race and act as though racial problems don't exist, because even just mentioning race is racist. And I have had a lot of the reading I've done has really pushed back on that. It's like, no, that's just a tool being used by people to not allow you to grow because you never express the issues, you know?
Well, I don't think it's always a tool to be, used nefariously. I think people are just uncomfortable with it and they don't know what to say.
Oh, no. I'm saying that that overall tool, like society is built that way because people don't like to talk about the problems there are. And so it is whether, and not saying like in the moment when I decide not to talk about race, I am using it as a tool for impression. Gotcha. I'm saying like it is a system that we've been raised in to sort of like keep us from ever acknowledging the problem. And as we know from the 12 steps, acknowledging you have a problem is the first step. And like, it's just like that whole thing. But anyway, so as I say all this, part of me wants to like cut out every time I misgender them, but like at the same time, I'm like, yeah, no, let the conversation be the conversation and try to just have it honestly, because I'm trying to do better with the sort of gender identity stuff, because it is new to a lot of us, especially where we live here in the South in Alabama.
And I don't think it's not as concentrated here as we feel like we want to believe. Like Neil Adams tells a story about how when he basically co-created John Stewart, who was an African-American Green Lantern, in the comics in those days, they would color black people orange,
right,
or like very, very tan, and they would draw them without lips, and they would just draw them as like generically white as they could, and then and he was like, why don't we just draw them like they are? And his editors were like, well, that would offend them, right? And he's like, why? Like, why are we whitewashing these people?
It's so hard as a white person. It's we so fear being called racist that we are scared to touch race stuff at all.
Yeah. It gets easier when you realize that there are certain people who will call you racist no matter what.
Sure. And there are also a lot of people who can hear that you're trying. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people that will go, just because someone calls you racist. And I realize we have this whole cancel culture thing that everyone's scared of. But like, that's actually one of the reasons I like podcasting, is because people hear us have these conversations. The people listening to this show right now are going to know we're having this conversation and we're talking about trying. And then if someone took one line of us misgendering Adira and go, look at this, cancel them, the people listening would go, oh, no, they're having a conversation about it. They're trying.
Right.
Whereas a lot of other forms of media, Twitter, for instance, is really easy to look at and be like, look at this one tweet. Take it out of context. Anyway, we have gone way off rails here. My last thing in my note. Oh yeah, for sure. My last thing in my notes is Lizard. Linus is in the hallway and the young child just says, Lizard.
Which I thought was a little racially insensitive.
I did too.
I did. I did a little bit. I was like, are we really going to have like Burnham walk up and be like, hey, let the kid pick some of your skin off your face?
Yeah, that was like, a little weird.
A little iffy.
I feel like there's been a couple things this season. I forget what some of the others were where we were just like, whew, that seems strange. That seems like a weird line to draw. But yeah, that is the idea of picking skin off his face is crazy.
But I like to think that Michael has a lot to learn. She's from the 23rd century, and as we know, in the 23rd century, it's perfectly okay and acceptable to give shit to aliens for being aliens.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. That's 23rd century culture. She comes from a different time.
Everyone points and laughs at, Mr. Spock for having green blood and struggling with his human and Vulcan side.
Yep. All right. you got anything else before you head into feedback?
No, I think the Federation is probably going to be evil.
Yeah.
Or incredibly misguided.
Misguided or possibly just not strong enough. I don't know why. I kind of got derailed there, but I meant to get into this. Like, I think that their world is doomed. I think that Book will want to join. Yeah. And then when they don't feel strong enough to go help when Osyraa finally comes for his home, like, what does that mean for him joining? And what does it mean for Burnham staying part of the Federation if the man she loves is deciding to go fight for his home and the Federation will not help?
I feel like a cat.
Why is that?
Who hasn't gotten used to their new owner yet. Like, I have enjoyed the comforts of Discovery. I enjoy, the food it offers me from week to week. But I still, like, when it goes to pet me, I still shy away. Like, I'm still, like, I'm waiting for him to hurt me. Because, like, I'm sitting there going, like, yeah, this is pretty good. But Discovery's going to wind up being the one who dismantles this current Federation and shows everyone how to be the Federation, aren't they? That old chestnut.
Well, see, I don't even mind that to some degree. Some form of that. And I understand the Federation is in a different place than it was. And it has a totally different power level. And just this like crime syndicate sounds like it might be able to take down the Federation if it wanted to, so I understand why the ambassadors would need to make decisions. And I think those kinds of dramatic tension between, like, are we able to help these people? It's not so much that we don't want to. We're not Mustache Twirly Federation, but we're just like, no, if we do that, then our member worlds will suffer, I
don't know. Admiral Vance might be Mustache Twirly, secretly.
Maybe.
Like, I kind of get the feeling, and I know we haven't seen him, and I feel like it's so we'll forget about him. But that precious man who woke up every day for all those 40 years hoping the Federation would show up, I kind of feel like he's in line to be the next, like, leader of the Federation.
That's possible.
Because he's the one that knows what it's about.
Well, and that's the thing is, it could be like that we get a new version of the Federation that Burnham is spinning off here or something. It's like, right. What if we get a split in the Federation, When does Calypso happen?
I don't know, man. It's like, I don't know that they actually said it. They said 1,000 years in the future in the press materials.
What if a Calypso is like son of Burnham and Book, the guy from Calypso?
Oh shit! You mean Quarrel or Kraft?
Kraft, is that it? Yeah.
I mean, it was also Quarrel. Like they just pulled that shit from Odyssey.
Sure.
The aliases.
Yeah, because it like, what if? We talk about this sort of split in the Federation, and in the earlier episode, Book called the version of the Federation that they're dealing with right now they called them the Vidraish. Book called them that too. So what if whatever he's a part of is in a fight with the Federation that like, Book and Burnham are about to start, and we have like a weird dueling Federation situation.
That'd be cool. I'm down.
Me too.
I in today's climate with the
like the political situation we have,
the current administration.
Sure.
I don't see the Discovery writers making the current Federation, like, I think Vance is Trump, dude. Like, let's just get down to it. I think Vance is Trump to some degree.
Interesting.
I do. I think they're gonna do that way. Go that way.
All right. I don't see the Trump connection yet, but you just mean he's that.
Yeah.
His group, whoever, not necessarily Vance even, but like that version of the Federation that we've been seeing is a version of the Federation that has lost a little bit its luster, and they've sort of like decided to make themselves smaller and stop doing everything they could for the outside world, which is kind of what's going on in the right wing in this country right now.
Xenophobic.
Sort of like we have to be a little more insular now.
Ends justify the means.
Yeah.
Help less people to help ourselves. That kind of situation.
Yeah.
I do. I think that's where they're going with it.
It's very possible. Very possible.
I mean, that's what Star Trek does. That's what the fans like to do. So when the fans who are writing the show are almost, assuredly 100% Democrat, which we've pretty much been. I mean, if you follow the people on Twitter, like the writers and stuff on Twitter, I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Sure.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just saying it's Star Trek. It's like, it is, as it has always been for the most part, a very liberal property, a very progressive property, if you want to go that way with it. If you want to say that.
Yeah.
So that's really all I've got.
Okay, cool.
As far as that's concerned.
Cool. Okay, well, we're about to get into feedback, but before we do, we're going to drop into a quick ad break. Right, we'll be right back after this ad we have no control over. And we're back, and it's time to touch on you guys' feedback. What do we got there, Dave? I saw a lot of stuff coming in on the transom.
Right. Well, let me ask you this real quick. And it's something I've always wanted to do on DC on Screen. And it's real dumb. It's like Monday Morning Shock Jock or something, but it's like I've always want to be like, all right, we're gonna get into the feedback, and then like have like a noise of an animal.
Sure.
You want to do that?
Sure.
You want to? If I find a horse whinnying.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer it'd be like a gerbil or something. Like sort of play against type, feedback, and then like, each week it's like, caw. I don't know.
Yeah, let's not do that. That sounds awful. All right. All right. Here's one from Stu Little. He says, kind of whelmed by this episode.
Kind of whelmed.
You know that reference?
No, I don't know the reference. I get the joke. I like it.
I mean, it's from Young Justice. Dick Grayson on Young Justice. He says, I'm whelmed. If he's the opposite of disturbed, he's turbed. He does that. It's fun.
Right. I like it.
That's a good show. I think you would like Young Justice. The most enjoyable part was Saru trying to find a catchphrase. Book and his brother and his background in general needs a lot more development than this rushed plot gave us. I disagree. I thought it was fine. I thought it was really good for what they gave us.
Yeah, for what they gave us. I definitely see where Stu's coming from. I want more too. But if you think about the first episode we ever meet the Vulcan homeworld or whatever, like there's always got to be a first one, and you can't get all the backstory into one. So I'm pretty forgiving with like, this is what this world is like. Here's a little bit of this relationship. And I think that what I'm hoping for is that we'll get more of that and it will become more and more developed. I do think they're doomed though, so that might not happen.
Yeah, well, I think I think we'll get a lot more of him.
Maybe. Yeah, it just depends on if they're able to save them or not from the clear barrage that Osyraa is bringing.
The clear and present danger. Yeah.
Oh, but we didn't mention it, but like the crazy thing, it shows how out of touch they are. I feel like that they decided. So Osyraa is there, and they're like, we can't fire on her because we're Federation and it will be an act of war. Why don't we send this ship out of our shuttle bay and she'll have to respect all of our treaties? It's like, no, that's...
I don't think... Yeah, we've got some feedback about that, but I don't think that's what that was about.
Well, no, that's what they said. They were like, they said they say if we're supposed to, if we fire on them, it will be considered an act of war. And so, well, what if a non-Federation ship fired on them? They try this like sort of version of legalese in the middle of this battle, and they send Book ship to do all the dirty work.
Right.
And then afterwards, she looks at him and goes, "This is war." Like, and they go, "Oh shit, she didn't respect our little legal trick."
No, but okay. I was pretty sure because they went out of their way to talk about like we are under direct orders, blah blah blah, and then Tilly says, "But if a rogue crew member took a non-Federation ship and did the blah blah blah," and then I think that was basically them giving themselves a little leeway with Admiral Vance.
That's not what they said. And then they said...
That's exactly what they said.
No. They said if a rogue crew member did it and then we punished her, so the punishing of her would also be part of the, like, hey, look, Osyraa, we didn't do it. This one crew member did, and don't worry, she'll be punished. And they even say
I took that as them saying that to Vance.
They even say it right before, though. We can't attack. It will cause a war. They don't say we can't attack. It's not our orders. They say we can't attack. It would cause a war. I'm pretty sure. I'm 90% sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was more about Vance. I mean, hopefully it would, one of those things where you're like hopeful that it'll stick with Osyraa, but more than anything, you're just like, we got to do the right thing here. But, to cover our butt with Admiral Vance.
Okay, you may be right. I had to go back and listen to that. I thought they said the thing about war. I could be absolutely wrong, though. It could be that she said, well, we can't go because that's not our orders. I don't know. I'm kind of scanning through right now to see what the actual wording is because... But either way, like... Okay, so one of two things just happened then. They... did a thing to not go to war with Osyraa, and then clearly Osyraa does not care. Or
no, she doesn't care.
Or they did a thing against the Federation's orders that just put the entire Federation at risk.
Yeah, and also looks bad on Saru. Like, Saru is in the situation of, I've got to do the right thing, but either I can look like I don't have control over my crew, because this is the second freaking crew member who's gone rogue against my orders, or I'm just willfully disobeying the Admiral. Like, which one do you want it to be? So I wouldn't be surprised if Admiral Vance just replaced him as captain somewhere and just said, you know what, if you can't go along with us, here you go. This is what we're doing. I think there will definitely be consequences from Starfleet as well. Or there should be, because nothing about what just happened was okay.
No.
But, even if it was like Admiral Vance telling him, like, look, man, don't try to pin it on somebody else. You went against our orders, at least, for lack of a better phrasing, have the sack to admit it.
Yeah.
Don't try to pin it on your pilot. And, if Vance is like willing to put her, in the line of fire and be like, we're taking you out and you're not going to be a part of the Federation or Starfleet or whatever anymore. And Saru like falls on the sword and says, no, it was my order. I mean, I don't know. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
That'll be an interesting day.
Yeah. That'll be an interesting day. Okay. What else we got in the feedback?
Let's see. Lil Trank says, is it only a matter of time before the Emerald Chain attacks Federation headquarters? Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. Do you think the Navarre is behind the Emerald Chain? I feel like someone familiar is leading the chain from the shadows.
Interesting.
It's a Romulan cabal.
Yeah, it's probably a Romulan cabal.
Isn't it always a Romulan cabal?
Always a Romulan cabal.
Yeah. Lil Trank says this episode was okay. I like Detmer going Will Smith in Independence Day. I also like Saru trying to find a catchphrase, but they've built it up. So when he picks one, it had better be good.
Right.
I don't think he'll get the chance.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll be captain for very long. Sadly, because of this episode. Personally, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Okay. By the way, it's he says if we attack, it's exactly what I said. If we attack, she will take as an attack from the Federation. And he says, at this point, we have no choice. And then Tilly says, what if we do the thing with the pilot?
Yeah.
And so
that sucks.
Yeah. It's definitely like they think somehow this will absolve them of guilt with Osira, which is just really naive. But I get why they would do that, because they come from a world of treaties and they can do the things that they can get around thing with this sort of third way thinking. But like, sorry guys, Osira's just a bad guy and she sees through your bullshit. Man.
Yeah.
Why do I like Osira so much?
So by the way, Nerd Talk Dan on Twitter had said the plan to have Detmer launch and book ship to offer plausible deniability doesn't work when your opponent is a crime lord who doesn't adhere to rules. To rule of law or diplomatic norms. So call out a Nerd Talk. We answered the question before you got to it.
No, but you're right. Absolutely right, Nerd Talk. Thank you.
Yep. I tried to create some headcanon. I tried to give them a little leeway, but no. They had too much.
There. And this thing, I don't hate this. It's not like that's still an interesting story. Like, it's a bad decision they made. It's a dumb thing they did, but it's them learning this lesson that they are not in their time. They're used to certain rules of engagement, but this is not that world anymore. This is sort of wild frontier now.
And if that's the lesson, if we get a Tilly who is remorseful and says, I shouldn't be the number one. And then like Saru's like, well, then I shouldn't be the captain. And then Vance is like, I agree.
Give me that spore drive. Give me that spore drive. Why am I letting a bunch of like 1,000-year-old dudes still run the spore drive? Give me that spore drive.
You fools.
Speaking of spore drive, like at this point, with all this stuff we're talking about, how likely is it that Adira and Stamets are going to have to go on the run because she's the only one who knows how to design an interface for the thing that doesn't involve Stamets, and Stamets is the only one that can control the spore drive, and they want to do atrocities or something, and like Stamets and Adira have to like go on the run together or something like that, or they have to do something crazy to try to like keep the Federation's grubby hands off of the Emerald Chain's grubby hands off of the spore drive.
Yeah, I do think that's probable that they will have to do that.
Yep, all of them.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't hear myself that time.
Yep,
I didn't think I did. I think I did call them they mostly.
Mostly
because I was talking about the two of them. I think I didn't even call. I don't know that I spoke.
You did. You said you did. You did it. You said she.
All right, my bad. I didn't even hear it.
You bigot. I'm kidding.
It's fair. It's fair. Totally fair.
Luke Thomas on Twitter says, I am getting rather tired of the formula this season. The formula this season is taking problem, spore drive, Burnham chase sequence, personal revelation, Detmer this week, emotional heart-to-heart, the end. I'd love a classic taut mystery episode solved by skill without any tears.
Huh.
That is a well, okay, let's talk about the formula first of all. You know, when you're looking at storytelling, there are lots of different formulas. Well, not really. They're like 7 or so. But I don't know. I think that's kind of a thing with the all Star Trek series, and I think all Star Trek series have their preferred formula. But I think it has been, personally, I think it's been, a little. It's been shuffled up enough that I haven't really noticed it too much.
Yeah, I haven't either. And I don't feel like this has been, sure, Spore Drive is their power. So yes, they've had to use a Spore Drive in every episode, but that's the whole point, is they are the ship with the Spore Drive. So every time the Federation has or they have an issue that needs solving Spore Drive wise, that's what they do.
And by the way, Spore Drive is basically the Enterprise is the only ship close enough.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a good point. But it's also just, that's how they travel. That's how this particular ship travels. So it's
yeah.
The fact using that as part of the formula is kind of that's like saying Batman took the Batmobile to the thing.
Yeah, Burnham chase sequence. That's shields up, red alert. That's all that is. There's an enemy ship. They're not answering our hails,
or just
or they answer our hails and they're a jackass.
It's the action sequence, and I don't. Me, I don't really care for the action sequence unless it has stakes. And I feel like for the most part they've done a good job with stakes this season.
Yeah, me too.
Every episode, Rin, with I think it was 2 episodes ago, or maybe it was last episode, I really felt the stakes with him on that planet trying to escape. In this episode, I really felt the stakes of Book's home planet, and I don't know. I guess I have not felt like this has been formulaic. I mean, last episode was with all that wonderful touching on the past, and we had the battle was not a chase sequence. There was no chase sequence last episode. It was all about them having a conversation in a room. Classic Star Trek stuff. I don't think this is fair. Feel how you feel, sir. Sure. I don't try to convince you. I don't agree. I think that this has been a pretty varied season with some pretty interesting storytelling. I mean, that first episode where it's just a exploration of the galaxy, being all alone, trying to find someone to trust. That's a cool episode. And then, you got the trapped in ice, everything's closing in around you. Scared of the Dark episode. You got I don't know. I think it's been full of varied and interesting episodes. There's only 8 of them, and 2 of them definitely don't have Burnham chase sequences.
Yeah, and personal revelation that can easily be Data says a thing about whatever bullshit he was doing, trying to figure out about his life in the episode, and then Geordi goes, "Data, you're a genius. If we just reverse the polarity." I mean, and then instead of a emotional heart-to-heart, Picard says some Shakespearean shit.
Right.
I mean,
well, and
guys, I mean,
it's all for all Treks have formulas. Sure, they all have because they have characters and settings. So there's going to be some things that relate from episode to episode. But I think that this is way less formulaic than any other Star Trek. I would claim this is the least formulaic season of Star Trek that has ever existed.
I actually agree with that.
If you're talking about all TV, sure, there are less formulaic things out there. There's crazier things, but this is the least formulaic season of Star Trek I've ever seen.
As for wanting the classic mystery episode, I like the mystery episodes that we've seen on Star Trek from time to time. I've always loved it when they do stuff by skill, as opposed to technobabble, which is what most of Star Trek series do for the majority of their run, where they just make up some bullshit.
It depends on what you mean by skill, because if you just mean good at future fake engineering, then I'd rather them solve it through emotional stuff,
Dude, I swear to God, dude, Star Trek writers will just be I've seen scripts, dude, they will just say, if we just do, and then they just do little brackets and say insert technobabble, and then they have the scientific advisors come in and make up some shit based on the terminology they already have in the canon.
Sure.
That's not solving it by skill. Original series, they would get a little tricky. Kirk would come up with some good combination between logic and McCoy's crazy emotionalism. But
we've definitely talked about it before, but I love when these shows narrow down the problem and it is a solution that you can see on the table. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a solution that is possible in the world already. You just maybe haven't seen it yet. And then you're trying to figure it out. The skill is the decision making, and then like making a good decision based on the facts that you have. And like as the viewer, when it's done well as the viewer, sometimes you can get there with them, and it's very satisfying. I find. Yeah. And I've found this show to be that. Like I mentioned last episode already, but like last episode when she decided the best way to do this is to just end this hearing now, I was like, that's exactly what you should do. Like I had gotten there a little before her, before she said it, and I was like, yeah, that's perfect. And then that led to her getting the data she needed. And I love that kind of stuff. It's like you have all the players involved, and this episode was a little more action heavy at the end. But I still, and you could say that the use of the two empaths to move the the locusts back was a little bit technobabble, fantasy babble, I guess.
Oh, sure.
It was just like, it's fantasy technobabble, because it was like, we're going to use this empathic ability, and you're going to use the thing that, but it was all things we'd seen before, even though it was a little like, we didn't realize that was what they were doing was possible. It was still there.
I was sitting, before they ever even said anything, I was like, well, I mean, they should be able to use their powers together and have Discovery amplify the message. Like, it was
really?
Totally in my head.
What episode was that they're talking about? Where they've done that before? Was that the?
Oh, I don't know.
Because they were mentioning, like, on this planet what we did, and I was like, I don't. Was it the one?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was the one where they go to the planet and they're trying to end the Klingon War. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it's the one where Saru goes nuts and runs through the forest and everything. I think that's where that was the tech that they were trying to use again.
Okay.
But I don't remember the particulars of that episode well enough to
I haven't watched Discovery 15 times like I have every other episode of Star Trek.
Yeah, I know. All right, what else we got?
One more thing from Luke. He does mention without any tears. And that's a common thing I see from people who don't like the show, is that they say that there's a lot more crying and whispering in Discovery than any other Star Trek show. Now, there's probably more crying, but unless Counselor Troy is being controlled by somebody, or I don't know. I seem to remember
Kira gets pretty fiery at times.
Tasha Yar is, that's the funny thing, is Roddenberry's track, the stuff that he was in particular in charge of, for someone who didn't want a lot of conflict between the crew, supposedly, his Star Trek is more like, we're going to cry and be hysterical over something, or be like really emotional about something. Once Roddenberry died, like all of a sudden, like they were so trying to keep in line with what Roddenberry wanted, or what they felt like he wanted based on his edicts, that like a lot of crew members became more and more like cardboard. Right. Like they just didn't have a lot of emotion.
That's what I was going to say. I totally hear you, Luke. If this is not for you, like you don't like that emotional thing, but like this is what I wanted this is the thing. I love Star Trek. I love a lot of things about Star Trek, but this is the thing that I always was saying is missing, is the humans being more human. Right. And I, as much as my favorite characters in Star Trek are the ones that like do allow themselves emotion, like, and we're dealing with a lot of characters here who are in very extreme situations, and so they're not kind of Geordie LaForge doing his duty or whatever, like on the or like any character that just kind of sits and does their thing, and then occasionally has a emotional thing happen to them. They're like, they're all dealing with the extremes of like 1,000 years in the future. Burnham has been outside the Federation for a year or so. Like it's all, these are extreme situations, but also I don't mind if the characters get emotional. I always wanted the characters to be more emotional.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I really liked about the original series is in the early episodes, you have Kirk saying stuff like, other crew members can afford to be emotional and show emotion, but me, I can't show weakness. I'm the captain. I can't,
right.
I can't be with someone. I can't show that I love someone. I can't do all this stuff. And I think that was like Naked Time specifically. And then, he gets the virus and he's, no hand to hold, no, whatever. And you have everyone sort of going through their own like emotional trials and how their careers and the expectations of their crewmates and what they're expected to do has like hindered them personally and emotionally. I love that kind of stuff, but I also like that, pretty much the lower, and they stay true to that a lot of the time on the original series, is like a lot of the lower classmen can be more emotional and more reckless emotionally. And as we've stated, as has been pointed out, Burnham is not a captain.
Yeah, for sure.
Burnham is allowed to whisper and cry.
Yeah. And you see Saru, you don't really see Saru doing that much. And
you don't.
I also just don't mind. One thing I like to see is having those emotional moments and then them overcoming those emotional moments, which I think is just more realistic. These are people not very far removed from us. And if you're in the middle of a space battle, if you have a moment, like Detmer has been having these sort of like flashes of like fear and post-traumatic stress or whatever. Like she seems to be really having a problem, but then she conquers it and then she does her job. And it's interesting, and that to me, that's drama. That's putting these emotional roadblocks in their way, which I don't mind. I guess I just don't mind. But I hear you, Luke. If that's not for you, I totally hear you. All respect to your opinion. I like this.
What was funny though is like I read Luke's comment, and then the very next thing that I saw was Star Trek had posted, like the Star Trek account had posted video of that great scene from Far Beyond the Stars where like Benny Russell is like crying, going, "It's real,
right
in my mind." I was just like, what are people saying that Star Trek doesn't have any crying?
I rewatched that scene recently, and it's been a long time. I love DS9. I will always love DS9. That scene is so melodramatic. Like just so far. And I didn't watch all the setup. So like, I think with the setup, it probably makes a little more sense.
It does. Like, dude, they put Benny through the ringer.
I realized that. And I was trying to show it to Alyssa, just like to show her like, hey, check out this, cool 5 minutes of screen time. And I put it on and she's like, I think without the setup, it just looked really crazy. He looks like he's way overacting.
Yeah. Which part of that is Avery Brooks overacting.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And then part of that is also like, no, he was crazy. Like the next time we see Benny, he's in a mental institution. Like that episode spans like months of Benny's life, and he is he's through the ringer.
Yeah, he's
like,
going nuts.
He's like with a cane. He didn't start that episode with a cane.
Man,
he has been abused because of his race, and he has really been taken apart. So absolutely suggest that to anyone. But I like Avery Brooks, and I like that he goes overboard with his acting.
I can really respect it for what it is at the time. But we're in a different era, and I think the acting that goes on in Discovery is it's very emotional, but also I think very real.
Yeah, I agree. And they don't have like the hysterical women on the show like they did in the original series, or like which you basically had like hysterical women who weren't hysterical for any reason other than they were women.
Yeah.
And for sure. They were frightened.
Oh man, I forget what I watched. I watched an episode for I was on another Star Trek podcast as a guest, and the Trek Geeks. I think it's Trek Geeks.
Okay.
And they were we covered a certain episode. It was basically like a woman being transported down to the ship, and it's the I'm trying to remember. Oh, it's the one where you meet Zefram Cochrane. That's right.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That woman was Eleanor Donahue.
Wait, am I wrong? I might be wrong. I don't know.
Was she sick? She was like a diplomat and she was sick.
That's it.
Yeah. And then like they met the companion, and Zephram Cochrane had been like restored and renewed, and he was very young. And that was Eleanor Donahue. She played Ellie on the Andy Griffith Show and went on to many, many other things over the course of her very long career.
That character, was just like, they were basically just talking about how like, oh, she's just a hysterical woman, like throughout the entire thing. I was like, oh man, this is so bad.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Any other feedback before we shuffle off?
We've got Stu Little says that Spock recording pales in comparison. Talking about from last week. The holo recording pales in comparison to what happened in the TNG Season 1 episode, We'll Always Have Paris, where Picard just gives the holodeck a place and time and is able to show him how his old girlfriend reacted when he didn't show up for a date 22 years earlier. Which, you know what? That would have been a look.
That is wonderful. Thank you for remembering that.
That's fantastic. But I will say this. That was a public place in Paris at a very obvious public location. Okay, it's like Eiffel Tower and shit.
It's like Eiffel Tower and shit.
I think it was the Eiffel Tower. But look, I would expect any street corner in modern day to have security footage in a public place like that.
Right.
So I would absolutely expect them to have, holo recorders in places like that. Now, that's something they should actually touch on. They should have touched on more in Star Trek, because I love the idea that, people in the future have to overcome this need to go back and look at certain events, the way they may have hurt someone, to actually go back and look at something that they were not a part of, but something that they caused. I love that notion, and I love that Picard finally did and went back and looked at it and dealt with what he did. And I think Star Trek maybe should have gone into that a little more over the years, instead of just being like, whoop, we're caught in another wacky holodeck adventure. Another holodeck malfunction. Like, there's so much that they could have done with the holodeck that they just haven't done, because... We'll Always Have Paris was cheesy. They would never have, he shouldn't be able to bring that up. Well, of course he should. Of course, like, that was a very public area. Of course they would have had, I mean,
it's debatable.
What bothers me is like when they go back and they look at like security footage, or they're having a trial, and they go back and look at the footage and it's like edited together perfectly like a movie.
Yeah, right. Because it is a movie. It is literally the movie that. But you could look at that as just like we're always watching these holo novels. These are all just holo novels we're watching.
And I thought about that a few months ago. I read an article about how there is AI now that's learning how to like basically make movies. And wow. I was just thinking like, oh shit, could you just have like an auto feature? Like, and dude, you could download an app that will just take your footage and make like out of a template, make a movie that looks good. Now, it might not be the content you necessarily want out of that video, but that you shot, but we've already got something resembling it.
Right.
So, you could headcanon any kind of bullshit.
For sure. For sure. Okay. What else? Anyway, what else we got there on the feedback?
Lil Trank says, thanks for replying to my feedback last week. Sorry I boned all of the facts about the Spock clip and unification. Dude, you didn't bone anything. Everybody thought that. Everybody went back and looked at that and said, how do they have that holiday? I did too for a second. And then I looked back and I'm still like perplexed. I don't know what the hell happened. I just have to surmise it was alternate takes or something.
Yeah. You guys are all having that Mandela effect.
Well, no, you recognize some of the footage and some of the words, and you kind of go like, "What did we do?" And it is very much a situation where you have to say, "What is the headcanon I can create for myself here?" Because he says, "I realize the Federation is USA, but since DS9, the Federation is showing more and more villainy, and I'd just like them to do more of the right things again. I would honestly probably argue that Next Generation in the original series had a lot of Federation villainy, shitty admirals, shitty colonels, and commodores, and all sorts of people who wanted them to do the wrong thing because of reasons. I have to get to blah, blah, blah. Right. You can't do this thing. You can't take your first officer to Vulcan so he won't die.
Sure.
I have a lunch date.
Yeah, there's always been a little bit of that pushback of the power of the Federation and bureaucracy or whatever.
There's always been like I feel like there's always been like a slight notion that not everything was quite up to snuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But especially when it was like, well, Kirk's not going to like this answer. What do you mean we're not going to fix the Enterprise? Time to mutiny. Little Trank also says, also please talk about the Ready Room sneak peek of the next Discovery episode. Try not to spoil in case you hadn't seen it. Was that canon already? Okay, so what he's talking about.
Yeah, spoiler alert if you don't want to know about next week, but we're going to discuss the next week's on next week's episode.
Right. Now, if you don't want to hear, thank you for listening. All the things that the Star Trek UCast.com.
Oh yeah.
They love you.
Love you.
Okay. So Ready Room produced, they didn't produce it. They put out a sneak peek scene where we have David Cronenberg back talking to Culber, and they're looking at a hologram of Georgiou. And Cronenberg is explaining that in the temporal Cold War, or in the temporal wars, they discovered that when using time as a weapon, they found out that it does horrible things to the body. Your cells were meant to operate in the time they were created in. And then they had never seen it before, what's happening to Georgiou, except for once with and they bring up the hologram of an alien. We've seen the alien before in a previous episode of Discovery this year, actually, but it's a character we've never heard of before, a time soldier named Yor. And he's in a 24th century Starfleet uniform, TNG season 1-2 kind of uniform. And he says he is from 2379. He was a time soldier from 2379, but he came from an alternate reality that was created during a time incursion from a Romulan mining vessel. Mm-hmm. Narada, anyone? The Kelvin verse?
Yep. I think that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure that's what it is. And what interests me about this is that seems like it's almost the way they're talking about that is as if that's part of the Time Wars.
Yeah.
Like it's clearly not exactly, but like I don't know. He's part of the Time Wars, and that time they call it a time incursion, which it clearly is. But like I don't know. It just interests me to think about like how did that spin-off universe relate to the Time Wars, because it seems like he is a time soldier from that time in that universe, which means our universe at some point was engaged in a war either with or against that universe.
Yep.
Yeah. What? Somehow
the Kelvin verse is tied up with the temporal wars, which would make sense.
Yeah. If somehow, we've talked about different theories of time travel. If somehow there's like a limited number of, let's say, universes that can exist or something, and we get to a place where like that resource is being depleted and like universes have to fight kind of thing, like that is interesting stuff. And like I've seen it in other sorts of media. And so, what is it? What does it mean? What does it mean?
I mean, we know there are versions of the Defiant that have gone back in time and shown up in Enterprise era Mirrorverse. We know, certain things about how, something can go back in time and be in a different reality, but we've never seen what it does to an actual person on a molecular level, which is what they're doing with Georgiou, because her body is not only trying to get back in time, her body is trying to get back in time, but to her universe. As Cronenberg's character explains.
Yeah.
And Yor was a time soldier who died in a very similar way. They'd never seen it except for with Yor. And are we going to find out why he was in the Kelvin timeline, or like why he crossed over from the Kelvin timeline into our timeline in the first place? Like, all of this is very interesting to me.
I doubt it. I kind of doubt we'll ever find out about that particular guy, but like,
well, yeah, no, I mean, just like, is there going to be
that the idea that these characters have like these characters have reconnected somehow, like these universes have definitely at some point now have reconnected, and that leads to all kinds of ideas of possible, crossovers between like the Kelvin timeline and our current timeline, and what could that mean? I love it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily concerned about Yor specifically, though. I do like the name. The name is fun for what he is.
Yeah, well,
the time soldier of Yor. But yeah, no, I'm primarily interested in a crossover with Kelvinverse, or what that might mean for, the original series era, or what it might mean for, what the prime timeline is currently now. I'm just interested in all that kind of stuff. And they could do whatever they wanted because it's science fiction. And they could make us all happy. Well, they won't make us all happy, but they can make me happy. With any number of ways of going into this thing. But also, I love alternate universes. I love time travel. And you throw both of those together, and it's all in Star Trek, and you have a happy camper. So, I look at me talking about my sexuality.
You've grown, man. You've grown.
Yeah, I think alternate universe and time travel storylines are my sexuality.
I weirdly identify with that. All right. Well, now that we've made you all participate in this weird sexual ritual of us talking about Star Trek, any other feedbacks? I think that was the last one.
That's it, man. That's it. That's all we got.
Well, I had a good time chatting with you this evening. It was a much longer episode than normal.
I thought it was going to be way shorter than this.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were going to talk about the large scope of everything Star Trek, and then get into gender identity, and then dive into the movies, and then
I didn't know we were doing that either, man.
And then actually have like a good 40-minute conversation about the episode, then go into feedback.
Yeah, I came in thinking this was a pretty straightforward episode. We're not going to talk much. I came into this conversation like an innocent babe into the world. Yeah. And 2 hours later, I'm jaded. I'm corrupted.
I'm sorry I corrupted you. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting a lot of blame here.
No, it's fine. It wasn't you. It was the back catalog of knowledge that we've accrued over these, these many years for Star Trek and our love for these properties.
Yeah. Well, I hope you all share that love, and it is wonderful to get together here and share it with you. We'll be back very soon. Please hit us up with any feedback for next week. We're trying to really get to these episodes as quick as we can, either like late Thursday or Friday, something when we can. Should be able to do something similar next week. So if you can hit us up with your feedback, after you see the episode, we might be able to get to the show. So thank you guys.
Don't wait. Just Star Trek UCast on Twitter, and just go for it, man.
I believe if you go to strandedpanda.com and click on the Star Trek UCast, I also have all the links and stuff there too. And you said StarTrekUcast.com takes us somewhere there too?
I mean, that's the website. That's our website.
Cool. I like it.
But yeah, Star Trek UCast on Twitter is a great place to connect with me, because Twitter's my primary social media at this point.
Yeah.
Let's just be real.
Yeah, man.
I hate Facebook. Every time I go there, it's just like angry rednecks who don't want black ladies on Star Trek, and I just don't get it, and I get angry and move on.
Yeah. I hear you.
Sorry.
All right. Well, we will be back. Peace. Jolan True.
And all the rest. Here on Star Trek Isle.
Thank you for listening to the Star Trek Universe Podcast, a Stranded Panda production. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv for his web videos. If you'd like to hear more from Matthew Carroll, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or listen to his music. Just search for Matthew Carroll anywhere you get music.